there was no real coaching happening because we didn't have the truth?
I would argue real coaching was attempted to be had, but it was predicated on a he said, she said situation. And so you really can't improve someone's caliber unless you really know what happened.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Rilla Labs. I am your host, Sebastian Jimenez. I'm the CEO and founder of Rilla. And today, I am so excited to do our first remote Rilla Labs because I am talking to a fascinating individual from an industry that we are so excited about. It's the multifamily industry, residential property management, anything apartment sales, and multifamily. We have Tony Sousa on the show today. He started as an actor, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. Like, I started as a stand-up comedian, and he became a leasing agent and rose all the way through the ranks, became a manager, became a director, became a VP, all the rest, and he's now running his own consulting company. He is the most interesting man in multifamily. Tony Sousa, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, man. Sebastian, great to be here. Thanks for the intro. That's like the hypest multifamily intro I've ever got. So kudos to you, man. I can tell you got comedic background and great energy. Great to be here.
Yeah, man. Why do people call you the most interesting man in multifamily?
Well,
let's just start there.
Listen, I don't want to throw the industry under, but the bar's low, and so just kidding. So I produced a commercial back in 2009 that was just that. It was the most interesting man in property management, and so it was on the heels of the Dos Equis commercials at the time. Yeah. 15 years ago. You may be too young for that. A lot of maybe young listeners would be like, "What?" Although Dos Equis is bringing them back, but ultimately it was the Dos Equis commercial. And then I had a lot of interesting stories. So my directors thought at the time, said, "Hey, we got to shoot a commercial with you as the most interesting man in property management." And that was 2009, off to the races. It gave me my legs, it gave me my visibility, and really kind of gave me my initial brand of something very different in multifamily. And again, that was 15 years ago. So that it's just stuck.
Was it because you had a background as an actor that they decided to put you in this commercial?
Yeah, not just because I think initially they thought I was interesting because I did a lot of commercial work. I was a journalist, impersonated Elvis Presley as a young child. So I just did a lot of different things in the arts early on. And then in property management, it's a pretty conventional business. And so I think, people around me were like, "Dude, like, you have a very interesting life. Can we shoot a commercial around this? And you probably feel comfortable in front of a camera." And I did. So it's worth YouTubing. I think you should be able to find it. Most interesting man in property management.
Tony, walk me through the origin story. How did you go from being an actor and to then actually being in property management, being in multifamily? And I mean, you've worked with some of the biggest, I think you worked at RPM, is that right?
Yeah.
And one of the biggest businesses in the space, and you rose up all the way to the top of the ladder. How did that happen?
Yeah. It was exactly as I scripted it. Just kidding. It was nothing in a way that I scripted it. I thought I was going to be a journalist in college. I studied TV journalism, and so I still have an affinity for telling stories and news. And you'll see some of the projects that I work on, are very sort of story oriented, if you will, and trying to get a compelling story out to an audience. So I was a journalist. If you live in LA and you have a little bit of charisma and decent hair, you get talked into being an actor. And so that's what happened to me. And so I gave my best go. I had buddies. I was sharing a room, trying to save money, auditioning while working, 7 different sort of odd jobs, from caterer to a limo driver to substitute teacher, you name it. And I just needed to save money on rent, and I was engaged at the time, and I was like, "Listen, I think I can do what a leasing consultant can do. I think I'm charismatic enough. I think I can close a deal for $75 per lease at the time." So that was the level of commission dollars I was earning. And so I just stumbled into it. And really, I stumbled into it in a lot of ways, like many in multifamily, but ultimately to save money on rent. And just off to the races. Every 6 to 8 months thereafter, I was given an opportunity to promote and grow. And I just thought, well, maybe there's something here.
What was the most fun movie project that you got to work on in your brief stint?
I got a chance to be an extra on a few different movie sets. I did a lot of commercial work, Gillette razors, just a lot of different things at the time. I mean, to be honest, like, if it was to work out as well as I was hoping at the time, I probably wouldn't be in multifamily, let's be honest. So,
like, I would still be in stand-up comedy, man. This is like me.
Right? Yeah, this is like our side hustle, let's say. People ask me all the time, funny enough, they're like, "Would you ever go back to LA play and like do it full time. You know, I got 4 kids, and we may get into that some. I got a big family, and obviously, as you know, as a stand-up comedian, I mean, you're traveling all the time, you're doing a lot of things, and so it's just not. Would I take a sabbatical? Absolutely. Would I take a sabbatical and do a movie or do a commercial or a show? But long term, I enjoy what I do.
You got promoted pretty quickly from what I could tell from your bio, like, and consistently. Since you started, like you said, basically as a leasing agent, just from the, very bottom and then to the very top. Did it help you that you were an actor before to communicate with people, learn scripts? Like, how did that help you?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I would say my ability to articulate an issue and then present ways that we're going to attack the issue was very, very beneficial for me from the very beginning. And I think a lot of folks, and you could probably agree to this as a comedian, you have to kind of know an issue inside and out and be able to then articulate what's happening, how we're going to solve it. And then if it doesn't work, you have to also be humble enough to be able to adjust on the fly. And so along the way in my career, I just was able to probably articulate things a little bit more clearer than most of my peers. I felt comfortable always on an asset call or a phone call or even a camera. Not that you have asset, calls on camera. Zoom these days, right, is probably the closest thing. But I always felt comfortable in a presentation room because you and I both know you had to walk into audition rooms and you get these stone cold stares of people looking at you. And then you just give your heart and soul. And then they just look at you and say, thank you very much. And you're like, did anything connect with anybody? I have no idea. I guess I'll just walk out of here. And, in the real world, outside of an audition room, you get much more engagement from your audience oftentimes because humans aren't trying to like cold shoulder you or kind of stone face you. If they like it, they're engaged, they're leaning forward, they're nodding. If they're not into it, they're body posture's back, arms crossed. So then you can make adjustments as a communicator. If body posture's back, arms crossed, you make some adjustments to get them engaged, right? If they're fully engaged, then you run with that, right? Then you have your audience and you know that they're eating what you're putting down or picking up what you're putting down. And so along the way, I think I just didn't realize I had all these skill sets. I wasn't able to even articulate them like I am now. But along the way, I was finding success and I was grateful for it. And I just continued to lean in.
One of the things that you talk about, I want to double click on that because I think it's so important. This ability, I saw it in stand up and I see it in sales now. It's like this ability to read the room and feel what the other person's getting from what you're putting out. That's so important. We had, my wife, we just had a baby recently. And she's literally, oh, thank you. She's reading this book on developmental psychology. And it's like babies who learn sign language, their brain develops so much faster. And entrepreneurs, one of the traits of entrepreneurs and creative people is that they're able to read the room based on facial expressions, based on sign, things that they're doing with their hands. And we recently had at our Rilla Masters, this sales coach that's a really good friend of Rilla, Alan Langer. He has this whole MO on body language, on how people communicate with their bodies. 80% of communication is not what you're saying, is how you're saying it, your body language. And so tell me a little bit about that. How have you incorporated some of that into your consulting and how to actually read the room? How did you incorporate that into your training at all?
Yeah, I love this point, and thanks for doubling back on that. I mean, as you said, the statistics are very high between tone and body language without words, right, are 80 to 90% of how we communicate. And so I think identifying that very early has helped me now as a consultant to be able to work with my clients, if you will, my individual clients, but also the partnerships and companies that I do work with to help them understand it's not just about getting you in the room, which a lot of what I do is help suppliers get in the room with the decision makers. And your team will also tell you, I talk to them a little bit further to say, okay, once I get you in the room, because I'm confident I'm going to get you in the room, what are you going to do with it, right? So tell me how you approach these sales conversations, because that's just as important for me as me getting you in the room as we work together with my clients, because you need to be able to read the room. You need to understand, and in my opinion, whoever's doing the most talking is often not doing the most listening, obviously, right? And so a great sales individual, which I'm learning along the way, I've always been an operator long-term, so I haven't really customarily long-term been in the sales world, but listening is going to be your greatest skill, right? You're going to have to listen and then be able to sort of recite back or articulate what you just heard with specificity, and then be able to kind of connect and bridge what you just heard with maybe your product or service that you offer. So being able to help individuals understand that. And I'll tell you, I also take it a step further because I also am a content creator and have a large growing audience on social media. Being able to read a social media room is also a next level skill. And it's a very 2026 skill, let's be honest, right? Post pandemic, I would even say. So, I help them understand how to read the social media room. LinkedIn is very different than TikTok. Facebook is very different than Instagram. You need to be able to read those rooms as well, not just your physical room, but now your digital rooms as well. So yeah, I try to bring all that value that I possibly can to my clients as well.
And I guess the actor background probably helped you, like being on camera and being able to like relate to the camera to the audience that's not there in the room with you.
I'll tell you something funny, Sebastian. You look much younger than I, but as you get older, it's harder to see yourself on camera because I can see a monitor here, and then it's like there's also a liberating factor that it's like you give less cares, and I'll keep it PG, but you give less cares the older you get. But it is more difficult to see yourself on camera. You just don't care as much. But yeah, I mean, feeling comfortable in front of a camera, all a camera is. I used to, I tell a lot of my clients now too. I mean, it's just a device, right? I know you're thinking about the people behind it. But the reality is, like, even on a podcast, it's just, I mean, what is this? This is a podcast technically, but it's a Zoom call that they do all day, every day as well. So don't overthink it. It's just really a glorified, I'm in a fancy studio and cool cameras. So, it feels a little more elevated, but it's just a Zoom call. Let's be honest. We're just trying to express ideas. You're expressing your ideas to me, and I'm expressing back to you.
When I did one of the things I looked at when we were starting going virtual sales and COVID and all of those things, it's like the camera itself became almost like the new being like a 6 feet, 6'5" tall male. Because people, if you had a great camera and a great setup, you were just
with like one big eyeball looking right at you. You're like, hey.
So Tony, tell me. So you were talking about this. Tell me about your life as an operator, just for everybody listening who might not know who you are. Just give us a brief history of Tony. How you got your start as an actor. You went into leasing, and then so what happened from there?
Yeah, so I got my start in Los Angeles with Avalon Bay, which is a very well-known, well-respected REIT out of the East Coast, and started getting my chops on the leasing floor, assistant manager floor. I tell everybody, and I think my audience understands because of the level of nuance that I could provide in my content or whatever the case is. I've been in every position, like almost literally, outside of maintenance. So I haven't spent much time in maintenance, and my wife would tell you that that's damn true. He's not great at maintenance around the house. Yeah. So yeah, I haven't been on the maintenance side, but I've been through the sales, the assistant manager side, the property manager side, the regional side, worked my way all the way up to vice president of operations here in San Antonio for RPM. And so I've been in all facets, but I've also been on the marketing side. I've been on the training side of things as well. And so I've had the privilege in a long career to kind of see how operations works alongside with all divisions of ultimately operations. But I've been primarily on the property management side. I now work very closely with suppliers and conventionally known as vendors to help them understand what operators, how they're looking at decisions, how they're looking at the future, how they're looking at markets, all those sorts of things. But ultimately, yeah, I spent most of my career on the operator side.
And so what is it? So you've been exposed to a lot of the top players in the space, and we always like to talk about Rilla and like what is it that differentiates the top performers from everybody else. So you've seen the inside out of like an amazing, well-ran institution, I should call it, and multifamily. What is it from what you've seen, Tony, that the top performing players in multifamily, what are they doing different than anybody else when it comes to operations, when it comes to training, when it comes to marketing? What are they doing different?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. You hear it quite often, but I think there's a commitment to excellence, right? There's a commitment to service and excellence in product and delivery and service. And, I have had the good fortune of surrounding myself both with great companies and also great people. Not every situation I've been in has always been ideal, but ultimately what I've tried to gravitate in my operator career is towards amazing organizations and try to surround myself with leaders that did not compromise on excellence and execution, right? And you and I both know that everyone can have a million ideas, and I'm a million idea guy, but if you can't execute them with some high level of execution and being able to deliver for a client in the operation business, our clients ultimately at the end of the day, sure, we report to asset managers and investors, but our client is the resident, and we understand what their expectation is, and our job is to deliver the highest level of service to that resident, because we understand intrinsically that they're going to stay, they're going to renew, and that's our business model in property management 101. So I would say just the commitment to excellence has been something as a young associate I saw, and I was held accountable to by great associates as well. And they said, Tony, don't cut corners on that, because that's going to come back to you. That's going to hurt you in the long run. And so
give me an example of how people typically cut corners, because it seems simple in the short term.
I think doing reporting, not being fully transparent in your reporting, not digging deeper in the numbers and in the data, selling yourself short. And I'll tell you, and I'll be frank with you and your audience. As somebody with charisma and comfortability articulating and telling stories, early in my career, I've told associates this, my peers as well. I felt like at times I smoke and mirrored it, right? Like early on, until I got discovered or called out by bosses or supervisors that are like, dude, don't just try to use your charisma to get in every single room. You actually have to know what you're doing. And that takes time, that takes experience, and you have to really dig deep into the data, into the numbers. And if you can combine charisma and all these other intangible things that you seem to have since you've been a young man, but you could also combine it with the level of expertise and knowledge of your business and what you're doing in execution, you're going to be a powerhouse. So I urge you to do the latter, because you seem to have this naturally, but your work ethic needs to be improved here. And so for me, that was my own personal story. So I really dug deep there. And this was, 10, 12 years back, property manager, regional manager. And I said, you know what, I'm going to be damn good at that job and learn as much as I possibly can and try to surround myself with people that do that. So there's a lot of different ways. Everybody knows in any business that you're in, there's a lot of corners you can cut. In my personal opinion, those always come back to either you or your client, and one way or another, there's no shortcuts in life.
And one of the things you said, which I love, by the way, because every business that we work with is usually a business that's trying to deliver excellent customer experiences and customer service. And you said, our customer, Jeff Bezos says Amazon is the #1 most customer-obsessed company in the planet, and he tries to bring that culture to anywhere he goes, Washington Post, whatever company, Blue Origin. And he always, one of the first questions for him is who is the customer?
Right.
Who is it that we are going to prioritize above all else? And Tony, you said the customer is the resident, is the person that's going to be living in there. And yes, we have investors, we have other parties that we need to kind of have some accountability towards. But the ultimate customer is a resident. I guess, can you talk about how some of the top players bring this culture of customer service, customer excellence into display with maybe simple things that they're doing that other people are not doing?
Yeah, I think doing the things, the unseen things consistently. And what I mean by that, there's a lot of things that you can cut the corners when it comes to residents and customers. I mean, you can not call folks back. You can not follow up on a work order that was completed. You can, and many in operations will know this to be very true. You could walk by a piece of trash on your property and not bend over and pick it up, right? Like that is like one of the most simplest things in our business that you could pick up, and take care of, like a level of detail, because you don't know what residents are looking out of their window to see the property manager bend over and pick up a piece of trash with their hand, or get a glove, or whatever the case is, if you want to be sanitary about it. But ultimately, what that's expressing to that customer and to your team is your level of commitment to the details of that property, whether that be in the reporting and the data and the analytics, or the conference calls that you're having, or walking your property with a fine-tooth comb and picking up trash, or grabbing a broom yourself and brushing some leaves back into the mulch where they need to be, right? Like, that's the level of detail that I had good fortune to be around. But also, I think there's a spirit of, shall I say, like servanthood, right? That I think great leaders in this business, especially in customer service, that you start by wanting to serve, right? Like you find happiness in helping somebody or serving somebody. Not everyone's built that way. And I'll tell you, when you're in your ivory tower, not you, but I'm just saying, like, if you kind of just get born into an ivory tower and you don't spend any time out in the field, or you don't push yourself to be out in the field, it's hard to connect and relate with some folks on the field, and they can't relate with you. And I see that as also a notable issue in multifamily. There's a notable disconnect that most don't want to talk about, because you do have a very high level financial side that you major in college, you get your financial degree, you kind of have a different career route, and then you kind of have the blue collar route, the one that I very much took. And I'll tell you, there's not a lot of like intersections outside an asset call later in your career, like, hey, Derek, meet Jason, right? Like now all of a sudden we have to figure this out. We've had completely different life experiences, and frankly, we respect different things. Now we have to figure out how to work together. And I think that's ultimately where I think folks new to the multifamily space find it very interesting and at times very fragmented, because there's many different sort of work groups within multifamily that seem to work well together, and some that completely don't seem to communicate very well together at all.
Yeah, I want to point out two things there. So the first thing is, what are the secrets that the top performing companies are doing differently? I see this every single industry that we go into. It's like people think that there's like some magic secret sauce. They figured out some sort of like quantum physics formula, and it's usually just comes down to doing the simple things right every single day, every single time, and actually having a commitment. We just had Joe Adams from Adams Automotive in Houston, not far from you, and he's an auto service shop. You think of mechanic, right? And what do you think of when you think of mechanic? You think of like greasy hands. You think of bad customer service. You call them, you need help, they're not going to help you. You think all these bad things. And what do? They just did all the simple things right. Their shops look insanely clean. They look beautiful. They have like these aquariums in the thing. The waiting areas are beautiful. TVs. They have video games. They have when you call in, all of their people are trained up to say like with a smile, be like, "Oh my God, how can we help you?" They stop. They breathe. All the little things done right in every single industry that we've gone into. And and we've gotten the great fortune of being able to see top performing sports team as well, like how they operate and how they practice. And you see that it's like the top performing athletes, they just do all the little things right.
Yeah, it's a commitment to the details, and that's something. Obviously, I got quite a few kids, but I have older kids now, 16 to 13, and it's just doing the details consistently right every time. And I also have an experience as an operator. I would early in my career, I called myself a professional storm chaser. So I would go to every troubled asset, and I took a lot of pride in turning it around. And what I remember always walking away or talking, to my family at home or to my peers and say, listen, this isn't rocket science, or to use your word, quantum physics. This is actually doing the fundamentals consistently right every single time and being committed to those as though that's like some sort of sounding board or Bible or like, this is what I'm committed to every single time to do this right. Whether somebody's watching or not watching, I'm committed to those details, because the reality is someone's always watching.
So how are people, and the point that you mentioned is that you have maybe leaders that are kind of in an ivory tower. We call them and we have a saying at Rilla, the spreadsheet managers. They just like kind of, in home services where we're really big as well, you have a lot of private equity in the space. Sure. And you have the spreadsheet managers that just basically manage their business from a spreadsheet. Right. And they kind of lack that frontline visibility of understanding what's behind the numbers and how are we getting these outputs that we're getting. How have you seen the best leaders bridge that gap and not be in that ivory tower? How have they done that?
Well, I think it starts from the top. I think ultimately, like senior leaders, executives need to understand that their Excel pushers, right, need to have exposure to the ground, right? And so they facilitate ways to make that happen. And it doesn't have to be far travels. And sometimes, obviously, portfolios are pretty distant, so it's a little more difficult. But great leaders understand the connectivity of a team, and they facilitate bridges and ways for those teams, even site visits or just spend a day out in the field, get to know them. And I understand, if you're comfortable in the AC and the ivory tower and pushing Excel spreadsheets all day, like to go out into a hot Texas day and get out of your car in the humidity in July and August, and to go walk into a site and talk to folks that don't have college educations, who don't talk perfectly, who don't look perfectly, to spend your day out there. I get it. Like on paper, that sounds like, why am I going to do that? And the reality is that happens more often than people realize. They just don't want to do it. And I'll give you an example. I spend a lot of time, even as a consultant, out on site. I don't get paid for any of that. I partner with clients and folks in the field. But why do I do that? Is because I think for me, I see myself as a voice of the people, if you will, of multifamily, to say like, this is what they're struggling with on the ground. And I want to use my platform to elevate that voice upwards so that those in those ivory towers that we're talking about get a chance to see it or hear it through my channel, because they don't have channels like I do, like you do, right? So my job is to help bring that message up a little bit and try to do it tongue in cheek, not too aggressively, but enough to say, guys, like, something's not working down here industry wide, and you may want to take a look at that. And you also may want to spend a little time on site talking with your teams. I know it doesn't sound glamorous, and I know the heat sucks, and I know getting sweaty stinks, right? But it means a lot to the team, and I didn't realize how much it meant to my teams until they told me later how much time I spent on site and how much they saw my face. They would tell me later, thanks for coming. I know you didn't want to be here. And the reality is, listen, you don't know I didn't want to be there. Maybe I did, but don't assume that either. But I was happy to be there, and that's part of my job to be there. And so I just encourage leaders that are listening to this, spend time in the field, push yourself past what you want to do and what you don't want to do, and get out there in the field, touch and feel, get your hands a little greasy like the mechanic. And I think it'll help you be a better leader and ultimately create better systems for your people on the ground.
And Tony, this is great. One of the things that we, I mean, obviously our product, we're the virtual shadow software, the virtual ride along. And one of the things that we always ask people when they come and talk to us, we're like, hey, how often are you going out there to shadow? How often are you going out there to visit your stores? So visit your locations, visit your properties. And we actually see that there's an insane correlation between the top performing teams be like, oh, their managers say like, oh, I spend a few hours every day going in and walking around some properties. I go there at least 3 times a week. And then you have the most common answer, which is, oh, no, not enough as I should be. Everybody knows they should be doing it. It's not rocket science, but they don't do it because it's hard.
Sebastian, you know that to be true, and they feel guilty in that answer, right? Not as much as I should be. The reality is they're not doing it at all usually, right? Let's be honest. And so, but they know in that answer, they know they should be. Why they can't get past the hump to go out there and do that, that's different for everybody. But I will tell anybody listening that's been like on the fence of like, man, I just don't have time. I mean, you could find any excuse in the world to not do anything you don't want to do, and you could also find every reason to do what you want to do. Let's be honest, right? But if you do spend some time in the field, and listen, you don't have to be out there all the time, but executives, get out there once every 6 months, get out there once a year, would you please, right? Like, it's going to make you a better leader, and it's going to have your teams buy into what's on your website and these culture proclamations even more. So I would just encourage anyone who doesn't have time to do that, to find time to do that. It's not only going to make them a better leader, but it's going to really inspire their team to want to work harder every day.
Sam Walton, I recently read his biography, Made in America, his autobiography. And one of the things that just struck me is how often that man was on the road. He literally became a pilot to fly his own plane, and he would be constantly visiting the Walmart stores. He was constantly on the field, not only to supervise and understand what was going on in the front line to generate ideas, but also literally just to motivate the team. Like, hey, I'm here, I'm with you, we're all in this together, we're partners in the business, right? Yeah. And one of the things that people usually think with Rilla is that we want to replace the physical aspect of going out there and shadowing. It's like, no. You need to keep doing that. And then you need to supplement all the times that you're not there with the virtual shadow so you can actually be there all the time and actually be like a high-performing team that like the coach in the field every single day, every single time. Well, and you can't supplant that emotional connection.
You make a really great point, Sebastian. And I'll double down on this point, but I'll also make the point that, I just made the point of like, get out there and get out into the field. But what I will tell leaders is don't get out there, and I think it was described to me, don't Seagull on your team. And what I mean by Seagull on your team, don't come out there and just, pardon my French, don't just come out there and shit on them. Right? Because I'll tell you, executives and leaders love to do that. They love to point out everything wrong when they arrive. Hey, nice to see you once in every 10 years. Every 10 years, you want to come up and show me what everything is wrong. Listen, like, keep a notepad, like, go back to your middle management and come back to them and say, hey, there's some things that we need to work on. But your job there is really to be, listen, I know it sounds ridiculous, to be a mascot for the company. I want you to shake every hand. I want you to, pour yourself a glass of water out of their Alhambra, not alkaline, reverse osmosis water. Have a little bit of water, be one of them for a minute, and just high five them, smile with them, listen to some of their most ridiculous stories because it'll make their day. And you're doing your job as a leader, in my opinion, whether it be multifamily or across industries. And it sounds like your experience in talking to leaders across the country, across the world, they're doing this. They're committed to the details of their business and their people.
So Tony, that thing that you just mentioned of like, hey, like leaders we love giving negative feedback, right? We love it,
They
right?
love
Because
it.
because we want to humans, we have a bias for action. You're a leader, you want to fix things, you have problems, you're seeing all the things wrong. That's fine. Like you want to fix problems. But what you just talked about, we talk about it as Rilla, my own sales team. It's the earning the right to give negative feedback. Just like when you're with a group of friends or with a group of longtime partners, and there's like an insane amount of trust and camaraderie, and you just, or even with your wife, you feel like you could just say anything. Like if you're with a group of friends and you're
be careful with saying anything to your wife, though.
maybe yes, but like when a group of when there's a lot of trust. Like if you're with your friends and they're roasting each other, and you're roasting each other with your friends, it doesn't come off from a place of like malice or anything like that. You can give direct feedback to the people that you trust.
Agreed. It's not coming from a place of you're not being condescending, right? Like you're saying, listen, we're all friends. I don't know what you're doing or why you're acting that way. I mean, there's a camaraderie that you just said. Now, and this occasionally happens to me, which I find very interesting. I'll be at a conference and I'll even hear it to somebody else, like somebody who doesn't know somebody will can I give you some feedback? And like low key, I want to tell them like, no, you can't. You haven't earned the right to give feedback. Like I know you think and unfortunately leaders and executives think very highly of their opinion because they've worked very hard. They did a lot of schooling. They had to, take a lot of stress and a lot of yelling from their bosses over their career. So now my time is now to give it back. The reality is we're in a different time. We're in a different era. We're in 2026, post-pandemic. It's a different culture out here on the field. And the people will not take it like they used to. They will walk and they will go online. They will tell somebody that I don't like it here. This is a different culture than the one that they grew up in. And they're having a hard time understanding that in a way that's truly empathetic. They understand it. They don't like it, but they're having a hard time adapting to it. That's what I see. And that's where I think there's some generational challenges happening in multifamily and I'm sure across the industry.
I think it's more like that the thing that you mentioned, which is that they're not out there enough. And so then they come in once every year, once every 10 years. Who knows who this is? And then they come in with all these opinions like, hey, you haven't earned the right to tell me how to do my job. You haven't been out here.
And also, like what I would sometimes forget, and I would have to be reminded as the vice president, like I would show up, but they spent 5 days sweeping every detail, or so they thought, right? Like the massive amount of preparation before an executive shows up that usually happens. And then the executive shows up and Seagull's on them, right? Yeah. And they're like, talk about demoralizing your team and just really, getting their spirits down. You think as soon as you leave, they're going to want to work harder for this company and these executives and these leaders? It's quite the contrary. And so sometimes I know it's just so natural to find all the problems, but I would challenge my teams, usually when they went out, to say, come back and tell me, 3 to 5 things that are going well. You just intrinsically are already going to have 10 things you want to improve, but by the nature of being a leader, that's how we're just wired. But I want you to tell me 3 things that you're really proud of during your site visit. So it actually challenges their mindset.
We have a thing, and really, you do a little trick. So with my team, like we're super close. I mean, we use Rilla at Rilla, and we like review everybody in sales. We treat it like a high performing sports team. We review every single call. We like give them feedback on every single call. And every time somebody comes here, like the negative feedback comes, everybody knows that it comes from a place of like, we want to help you improve because we've earned that right, because we spent so much time with them. We know what's going on. We see everything. But then what we do is we also do this thing, we call it a superpower at Rilla, which is we highlight the really, really good things. We highlight that for everybody. And it's like one of the most powerful pieces of feedback. We do it about 20% of the time at Rilla, where we find somebody doing such a great job at any, like doing an amazing discovery with the customer, doing an amazing kind of presentation of our products. And we highlight that to the entire team. We just tag them. We call it the one for all, which is you take one example, you highlight everybody. How good does that make that person feel? It makes them want to do it more. And then you get everybody else to learn from what's actually happening. So you as a leader, you go on an on-site visit. How cool would it be if you say, guys, this is awesome what you're doing. I'm going to take this back to corporate. I'm going to take this back so that everybody else can learn from this one thing that you guys are doing like in an amazing way.
Kudos to you and your team, Sebastian. I mean, that is a complete jolt of positive energy, whether it be your site team, your corporate team, whatever the case is. Like they are now motivated to want to be better. I learned this with children. I learned this with pets, right? Like they're motivated typically by positive reinforcement. Sure, accountability needs to be a part of life and a part of kids and employees and all of these sorts of things. But can you find the bright spots and opportunities to say, you're doing a great job here. Can we build on this? And the reality is they want to build on that, and also lead it to the next one. I think people now more and more post-pandemic have said, listen, like I want to get some better at what I'm not good at, but you know what? I want to double down on my strengths. And I encourage everybody, you know, if you're not good at something, try to get a little bit better at it. But you know what? You may never have a mastery in that. You may, if you're not good at Excel, you may just never be good at that. Your brain is just maybe not wired that way, but you're dynamic at discovery. You're dynamic at building rapport with a client. I want you to double and triple down on those skills, right? So, but it takes a leader to be able to sort of see that in somebody, and also, you know, kudos to you and your team. You've created that culture to say, listen, you're badass at that, and we want to tell everybody about that, and we want you to know that we think you're badass about that, and we're proud of you.
How does mystery shopping play into this idea of leaders trying to get visibility in the front lines? And for those of you who don't, for those listening that don't know mystery shopping, if you could unpack how multifamily operators, how they're using mystery shopping, and what are the benefits, what are the drawbacks? Like, how does this play into that conversation?
Yeah, so the mystery shop has been around as long as I've been around. Obviously, it's a part of the sales process, almost in every industry. For property management, it's been pretty antiquated for a very long time. It's typically been probably 10, 15 years now, maybe 10 years. You know, we get audio recordings, probably 15 years now with the technology to get it through the phone. You're able to record those calls. But to this day, my understanding is still it's a secret shop will come out on site. They'll either have a notepad or just by recollection or memory, ask a list of questions that they're expected to ask, a sales consultant, and then from either notes they jot down or from recollection, they will go back to probably their computer or a tablet or a notepad, if you will, and just jot it down from recollection on how their experience was. And it's always provided some level of baseline feedback, but to be honest, it wasn't incredibly transparent. And I'll tell you, as someone who has been a mid-level leader, you know, having some of these conversations, these coaching calls, if you will, with my sales team from a very sort of subjective perspective, that was just written down on a notepad was oftentimes very difficult. And I will tell you, my lack of strength of a leader early in my career, typically if they push back hard enough, my sales team, then I would concess and say, listen, this.
There's no truth. Nobody knows what happened.
I don't,
she said.
This is our only source of truth, and the reality is there's no visibility to it, right? And so we just have to trust. And then you would go back to your sales team and say, well, can you prove or verify what they said is not accurate? And of course, that like it's he said, she said at that point, right? Like now I'm in the court of law as the judge to say, okay, I have this report. You're saying this didn't happen. At the end of the day, like this is really not a fruitful coaching moment because nothing's really getting accomplished here. You're frustrated and you feel that like I've secret shopped you behind your back, and you also are frustrated that you think the shopper had it out for you, which no, I'm sure they didn't. But you know, you're in your feelings, and the shopper's over here collecting their $75 or $50 or whatever they're doing, and moving on to the next one, providing a really average assessment of every place they go.
That is we found mystery shopping in so many industries that we've been into. There's like in home building, anywhere in luxury retail, in multifamily, it's present. And I didn't even know that this was a thing until we started getting into these industries. So I was like, wait, what? You have a person pretending to be a customer, and it's like so random. And I'm like, what? And I guess I understand why this happens. It's because leaders want to get visibility into what's happening. So we're like it's like almost like the person's pretending. And oftentimes, I don't know if this has been your experience, we see that, leasing agents and other industry salespeople, they literally know that it's a mystery shopper. So everybody's just pretending.
It's also, it's funny you touch on that. I mean, it's a lot of smoke and mirrors, right? And so like, they really quickly can assess, is this the consistent type of person that comes through my door? And there's some fair housing stuff involved there that you got to be really careful about. But they, I'll tell you, sales associates and leasing consultants in property management, they are like some sort of, like primal animal and smelling out who the shoppers are, and they're pretty good at it. And so the problem is, you and I both know, I mean, we laugh about it, but you smell one out, and I was a leasing consultant, and I used to try to sniff them out because I knew that they would come every month or whatever the case is. I was like, oh, that's a shopper. So would I hit every step of service and crush it, get 100%, and have my boss think that I'm just crushing it on every tour? Of course, because there's, very small financial incentive, or I get a high five from the boss, whatever the case is. And then if I don't crush crush it, or I didn't essentially discover the mole, I would not me, but I mean teams would either accept it or deny it, and then it still really kind of goes nowhere. So, that's. I know we're not going down the road of your technology, but as I came to learn more about what you guys are doing and the problems that you guys are trying to solve in property management, but ultimately in sales, is just providing more visibility and more tools and opportunities.
You get the real coaching, that what you were talking about. It's like, hey, there was no real coaching happening based on the truth,
based on real information, right?
Yeah,
I would argue real coaching was attempted to be had, but it was predicated on a he said, she said situation. And so you really can't improve someone's caliber unless you really know what happened. And now with technology today and exciting to see your product continue to grow in multifamily, that provides training managers and directors more opportunity to be better coaches and ultimately affect the ground to increase closing ratios. All the things that come with improving your sales team is ultimately going to improve your operations.
I guess talk a little bit about that. Like, I'd love to get your thoughts on, because obviously we absolutely love coaching. It's in our soul. Like we call it this the coaches podcast. We talk to coaches from all over the world. Like, our product's a sales coaching product. We absolutely love coaching. We love coaches. We love people who get coaching. But we just love coaching. I guess in multifamily, because you know so much about the industry, what can you tell us about the impact of doing proper coaching and proper training and development on the actual, bottom line metrics, like, increasing occupancy rates, increasing retention, whatever it may be?
Yeah, I mean, the more visibility you have, the more ability you can provide specific and clear training, right? And ultimately it'll start with accountability, but ultimately it should lead to training and coaching. And, if you don't have those tools available to you, you can't do that. And so specifically, we'll start with leasing, giving, we'll say property managers or training directors or leaders at the property level side and even mid-level side, the transparency of information just allows them to have the conversations they need to have, which ultimately, if they're having effective conversations, and that's a whole different thing on, there's also some training for trainers, right? To make sure that you are a great coach, because you can have this information and still deliver it in a very clumsy way or condescending way, or, a way I could see some of this happening is, hey, let me ask you some questions on how that tour went. And you're playing a game of catcha, right? Like, and they say something like, well, I got the audio, right? So like there's a couple different things happening here, but first and foremost, your technology allows for transparency and visibility into this. I think there's another layer to make sure that our teams are becoming better coaches now that we have information available to us, so that we are taking this visibility and not playing a game of gotcha, right? But a game of like, how do we get better at this? And let's listen to this together, right? Because there's opportunities. And we used to do that with lease consultants on the phone. We would play back the phone call, the 5-minute phone call or less, and just say, hey, where are there opportunities that you thought you could do better? Where did you totally just bomb this thing? And it's super cringy for the team, right? They're just like, ooh, that's my voice. Like, that's what I said.
Yeah.
That's terrible. But it's undeniable when you listen to it together. Now you've provided the technology to do it out in the field, which has been a blind spot for our industry forever, and probably many industries as well, out in the field touring, right? You never knew what really happened out there. Let's be honest. Like, why was Johnny closing every single tour? Well, he was breaching every fair housing law and actually selling his side services, and he got all these leases. Now, there's a level of accountability for that too. But you just never had, access to that. And so, that increases obviously retention, closing ratios ultimately on the sales floor. Retention of residents also, dependent on the product and service, the more visibility you have into conversations that are happening, and obviously technology, retention technology, things of that sort, just give you more insight on probabilities and likelihoods of people staying or going. And so you can actually take more proactive actions, if you will, in improving your operations ultimately. And the more you improve your operations, ultimately you're going to be improving the bottom line. And that's what asset managers, investors want, is from owner managed or third party, is improve my operations, because if you improve my operations incrementally and over time and consistently, that asset is going to provide financial outcomes that our shareholders, our investors are going to be happy about, whatever vehicle that they want to push it into next, whether they want to sell the acquisition or the property or whatever they may want to do with it from a financial institution standpoint. But ultimately, it all starts with great service and great operations. And again, having tools available to us in 2026 that allow for that is going to be key for ultimately for portfolios to continue to grow in their financial output.
So I wanna touch on this before we run out of time. Every single industry we have gone into, we're usually like the new AI thing in town. Like everybody's like, oh my God, AI is coming to home building, AI is coming to home service, AI is coming to home remodeling. Multifamily is the first industry that we've gone into where AI was already here before we even got here. AI is already here. Elise AI and companies like Elise AI, they changed the game in multifamily, and it's really coming from the automation side. Like, how do we automate phone calls? How do we automate outreach? How do we automate a lot of different things? I want to ask you about that. I mean, Tony, how do you see the future of AI in multifamily? There's even companies that are doing self-guided tours. There's not even a human being in the entire interaction from phone call. It's not happening as much, but it's literally no human being from the phone call to the tour to everything's done automatically. I guess, where do you see AI going? Are we gonna see a fully automated process to lease an apartment from somebody? Are we gonna see, where do human beings actually come into play? Like how does this play out?
Yeah, it's a good question. Obviously, it's a question I get asked a lot, just, especially from mid-level to lower level folks. Tony, what's happening? Am I going to lose my job ultimately, right? Yeah. And the reality is, I think in certain markets, you're seeing what you just described. High dense markets, coastal markets, you're seeing really a lack of human interaction in the sales process. And good or bad, to me, that feels like more of a moral question, right? So I'll leave that out, from an answer from me per se. It's happening. Now, I do think it also has a lot to do with generationally, the norms of business. For example, I think Gen Z, Gen Alpha, they're going to expect this to happen, that they can automate anything. They could buy groceries without a teller. They can get an apartment without a teller. They can get a car without actually having to interact with any human. Again, I won't chime in if that's good or bad. I do think that there's obviously some wonderful convenience to that. Do I think, from a humanity standpoint, that we're going to be losing some human edge there? I do. That's probably for a whole nother podcast, right? The humanity of AI or the lack of. So yeah, I think the technology is going to continue to be there. I think it's going to be slower than people realize, because I think prospects and residents are still going to have different expectations based on their generation of expectation of how they grew up. And so I think there's a generation of folks, and I would say from my generation of millennial, Gen X, all the way up to boomers, that still expects some level of human interaction and level of service that is there. I think as you get a little bit younger, it's less. So I think the markets are going to be fragmented in a lot of ways, because a lot of the Sun Belt is still kind of older class B assets with an older demographic, if you will. And then you have those coastal markets, high-rise markets that are going to be a little bit more younger and more technologically savvy, and frankly are going to get tired of humans and just want to use technology because it's faster and better, let's be honest, right? So I think if you're an associate in this industry or a leader in this industry, but I'll say an associate, you really need to figure out where you fit in this process. And I just spoke about this just last week in Maryland on a keynote. I think the intangibles of being human are going to be scarce, right? And I think they're going to become valuable. Anything that becomes scarce becomes valuable. And so if you can really hone in on your ability to think, make decisions in rapid pace and rapid speed, information has become abundant, right? Answers are at your fingertips. That's not your golden goose anymore. I can get you answers, boss. It doesn't matter. My Claude bot can give me answers. I don't need answers, but I do need judgments. I do need opinions. I do need a point of view. And so I think for folks, they need to start tapping into, what do you really think about certain things? That's where I think you're going to survive, is to have a point of view and to also have a level of experience that is invaluable, that can't be automated. And that's where I really hope a lot of folks really lean in, especially at that mid-tier, middle management, and also the lower level or entry level, shall I say, site level, that you need to figure out how to become and stay relevant and valuable. And if you're not relevant or valuable, you're gone.
I think from what we are seeing from all these different industries, and it's happening, it's this idea of the human asset in your brain becoming more valuable because it's harder to get. I think what we are seeing from our standpoint is AI has basically made the bar higher for human beings to actually increase their delta. So for instance, in engineering, we all of my engineers use Claude, but I haven't fired a single engineer because of Claude. What happens is the bar for engineer productivity has gone much higher. And for us to hire a new engineer is like, we need you to be so good, because what we need is not just some coder, because the code can literally just be automated. What we need is somebody who understands the mechanics of how something works, understands systems, understands how to put a product and interacting with a user. All this tribal knowledge that the best engineers have in their head that they can only get from the real life experience. The same thing we say in sales. It's like, listen, if you go and talk, you were an actor. I was a stand-up comedian. The actors and stand-up comedians, if you think about it, are the best salespeople on the planet, because people literally go pay money to sit there and watch them talk for hours, right? And so if you think about it in sales, if you want to have a career in sales, the way I think about it is like, listen, if you can actually become better at your job and use AI to up-level yourself and use AI to train and coach, and if you can actually increase your delta from the baseline, then you don't get automated. You actually become all the more valuable than ever before.
And I couldn't reiterate that anymore. Anyone who, for me, it's the little things, like the creative side of what I do. All of those sorts of things, like something that can't be replicated or automated, I'm going hard on that. Like I'm doubling down on that, because that's my safety boat. That's my only way to survive in this automated future where information and answers are at your fingertips. The only way for anyone to survive is to be uniquely gifted in their human skill set. And I'll bring it back to what we talked about originally, excellence in service. A lot of people think they give good service. Good service is not going to be good enough, right? Yes. You're going to have to give excellent, world-class service. And if you can't do that, you will be automated and you will be out. So I think it's an honest assessment. And I think where your tool can help too is to say, oh, I thought I was a good sales consultant. The reality is, good is not good enough, right? And so now we have tools to get you better. And you're only going to survive if you get better. So I would hope that you want to survive, but if you don't want to survive, then that's a different conversation, right?
Yeah. Tony, I think we're right at time. What's your last words of wisdom that you want to give to the folks listening? We have a bunch of leaders and coaches and industry leaders from all over the world. Tony, what do you want to say to them?
Yeah, I would just, I think what the world needs now is just more empathy, more thoughtfulness, more humanity. And, listen, like we got the systems, we got the automations, we got the technology here. Just continue to be the best human you possibly can be. That's what I'm trying to do. And I just encourage every leader listening to be the best human they can be.
Hell yeah, that's a beautiful message, Tony. Where can people find out about you and your company?
Yeah. You can go to tony-sousa.com, go to LinkedIn. I'm there as well. And you could Google me as well. Tony Sousa, Multifamily is probably the best way to find me.
Tony, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This was so fun.
Appreciate you.